welcome back to a refresh look at a game I actually played about a year ago. Yes, Insurgency Sandstorm was arguably the first hardcore FPS title that gave me a taste for that genre, and then had me try out the likes of Hell Let Loose, Squad and Postscriptum subsequently. So it's almost exactly a year since we had a look at Insurgency Sandstorm. I'm happy to say that development has continued with this title. In fact, it was the Steam news item about the launch of a free expansion, Operation Nightfall, that made me want to revisit the game and check out how it's doing. So of course ask, is it worth playing? And just before we get into the video, in my normal full disclosure way, I want to say that the publishers gave me access to the game via Steam for the purposes of making videos just like this one. If you're new to this title, then you may think it looks perhaps a little Battlefield-y. But if you want to make that comparison, then you've got to think of more Battlefield in a hardcore server. So no spotting, no kill feed, and a sim-like damage model. It certainly feels closer to Arma and Squad than it does Battlefield or COD. You might argue that it's less far down that milsim path road than something like Hell Let Loose, Squad or Postscriptum though. The damage system feels similar, very firmly in the simulation camp, but Insurgency Sandstorm doesn't have that open area, open landscape feeling that those titles feature. Like those titles though, it lacks things like a kill feed that might lead you to imagine that it might be annoying not to have that as like feedback, but not being 100% sure if you made a shot or what that series of gunshots means for the balance of the battle helps to build tension and draws you into the experience. The game immediately feels good to play again. Things like the weapon handling are very sim-like as well, but those coming from a more arcade title may need to reacclimatize a little to the very fast time to kill. But there is some structure to the gameplay that you might not be expecting from something with this kind of milsim attitude. Things like the ability to see teammates through walls or have set spawn locations with spawn waves shows the devs blending with more traditional FPS mechanics. Sandstorm does tension really well though. There are periods of calm when waiting for enemies to attack or when holding an angle. This is really heightened by the addition of the night maps with Operation Nightfall, but we'll talk about those more in a second. As always, those quiet moments contrast against the intense action and make it feel all the more visceral, and ultimately combine to give a really addictive experience. Team play, even on normal auto-queue servers, can be good with decent comms and callouts, though I'd say it's a little boisterous compared to something like a clan server in Squad. It's not CS levels of shouting and recrimination, but I'd say playful banter is probably a decent description. I'd imagine this sort of game attracts the kind of like-minded players who enjoy the more brutal edge that a hardcore FPS delivers to something over more arcade-like. So people tend to be of a more unified mindset and approach. And just a quick aside to say, if you're enjoying the video, please do tap the thumb up button. It helps me out with YouTube and discoverability and all stuff like that. And if you tap the subscribe button as well, then that's really appreciated too. Thank you. Having that extra structure to the matches, the set spawn locations, spawn waves, etc., does mean that the game doesn't feel as reliant on teamwork to provide a good experience as something like Hell Let Loose, Squad, Postscriptum. Don't get me wrong, teamwork is still a cornerstone of the experience, but disconnecting things like spawn mechanics from needing to rely on other players means that there's a reliability to the experience that titles with a more open design don't routinely feature. I'm not using that as a criticism of any game though, I'm just saying that both choices have their strengths and weaknesses, but if you imagine a player who has, say, 20 or 30 minutes to play a game in the evening, then Insurgency Sandstorm is well placed to provide a reliable hardcore FPS experience and a match in that kind of time frame. I'm happy that there's a place in the landscape of these style of games that allows these different design choices to be popular in their own way. We should probably talk about that new expansion too, Operation Nightfall. The meat of that new content is a new map to the pool, a few new weapons, but night versions of all existing maps. And when I say night, I really mean it. Not a tweaked lighting and, a blue filter. Without visual aids, these are almost totally pitch black experiences. And my initial taste of this mode, when I'd forgotten to spawn in with night vision goggles, shows quite how different this feels to play. I must admit to being slightly nervous about whether this would ultimately feel like a bit of a gimmick, but I'm happy to say that the experience of playing this night mode is way more involved and enjoyable than I had imagined. I don't recall another title offering a more believable rendition of fighting in these conditions, where visual flair and bloom actually becomes mechanics that are used against you, and for it to feel enjoyable and fresh. It affects the metagame as well. Your loadout points that you spend on items to be added to your spawn kit must now be adjusted to afford some night vision optics, whether you decide on cheaper, narrow single scopes for your rifles, or single optic head-mounted piece, or maybe an expensive wide-angle multicolor military-grade dual scope setup. Well, that must all now be taken into account. Then there's how these systems deal with things like bright lights or rapid changes in lighting conditions when moving indoors or out. It causes moments of reduced visibility and challenges that I don't really ever recall experiencing in another title. The graphics still feel like something of a mixed bag, perhaps even more so in 2020. I'd say that the night vision effects actually help the game out a bit here. The lack of fidelity in some of those areas becomes less obvious in those extreme conditions. Set dressing in high traffic areas still feels believable and well done. There's none of that empty room film set feel that we've seen from other titles, though you would say that it isn't up to the level of a AAA title, though I would also point out that this is an indie developer and not some multi-hundred person team. The sides of the maps, the less traffic areas, can seem a little less defined and polished, rocks looking a little bit too polygony for 2020, but given the style of the game it doesn't detract that much from the experience. It has a sort of honest feel and does a decent job in serving as a background for the action. Audio is still a strength for Insurgency Sandstorm all in all. I'm going to start with the obligatory, is it as good as Battlefield with War Tapes mode enabled? Okay, no is the answer to that. It's not quite as visceral, but it does still feel like a good job and certainly doesn't detract from the action. It seems to do in-location or in-environment gunfire really well. Fights that happen at a distance feel especially believable and kind of placed in the world. And of course, hearing fighting happening far away helps to build tension around your maybe quiet sector. Closer in a room scale audio is perhaps less overwhelming than I would actually like it to be. If we could have some reverb from inside that room so it sounded like an extremely loud event, then it would have more impact and I think feel a bit more realistic. Even outdoors, the first-person weapon sounds aren't the completely occupying, all-encompassing moment that I'd prefer them to be. These are huge pressure changes, an explosion happening inches from your character's face. To fit in with the sim theme, I'd like to have them louder in the mix and reduce the background noises too. Perhaps even a little distortion in enclosed environments would have them sound as lethal as they are actually to use. There is a fair amount of customization that you unlock through gameplay as well. There's an in-game currency that you earn from leveling that you can then spend on tweaking your soldier's appearance. There's nothing too outlandish, this keeps with a milsim theme, but I guess it's nice to have some control of your experience, and it feels like you're making progress by leveling as well. With this recent free Operation Nightfall expansion, the night maps, the new guns and so on, they did also launch some optional paid cosmetic DLC for people who want to continue to support the development of the game. There's 2 model character change skin options, a ghillie suit and a Night Stalker setup that are pretty reasonable at £2.69 each if you want to pick them up. And normally at this point, I'd say none of the customization content goes to that kind of CS or COD-like skins and sticks to a sim feeling. But this time, along with those 2 paid player skins, they also released a couple of weapon skin packs that I think are perhaps one step in that direction. The Red Dark and Midnight Blue weapon skins also cost £2.69 each, which is pretty cheap, but the quality doesn't look that terrific to me, and the style doesn't, in my opinion, fit with the rest of the game's aesthetic. Optional cosmetic DLC released this far from launch feels okay to me, especially with the decent pricing, but as a first foray into trying this out for the developers, I think it's worth giving the devs feedback about how good the player cosmetic skins are, and how those weapon skins feel like they missed the mark a bit. Performance feels in a better place than it was a year ago, insomuch as I recall needing to tweak some settings to find a stable, decent frame rate before, but this time I really didn't think about performance at all. It always feels like a stable 60 plus FPS even on this old machine. I'd imagine newer, top-spec machines happily running games at high refresh rates. Since the recent Operation Nightfall patch, Insurgency Sandstorm has seen an uptick in players. It's peaking at around 3,000 concurrent players per day, closer to 4,000 on the weekends. For a niche title like this, I'd say that's not bad at all. Anecdotally, I found that there were always community servers occupied with players, some of them with having mods and stuff as well, but I didn't stray too far down that path. But when I just used the auto queue feature to put me into a game, I was only ever waiting a handful of seconds before finding something. So is it worth playing? If I'm honest, I was a little concerned that my impression of enjoying Insurgency Sandstorm last year was partly down to my overall lack of experience in playing games in this hardcore milsim genre. Just how good would the game still feel after playing Squad, Hell Let Loose, Postscriptum and so on? Well, I'm happy to say that that wasn't my experience at all. I still thoroughly enjoyed playing Insurgency Sandstorm again, and it absolutely still feels like it has a place in gaming in 2020. That extra gameplay structure with the spawn designs now feels in comparison like a reasonable route to take over a more open world design. The game doesn't feel like it needs as much time sunk into it to pay back and give you a good time playing a hardcore FPS. The maps still feel well made, perhaps some feel a little similar to others, but then you have maps like Outskirts that still feel like a genuinely unique experience. It's a game with some rough edges that I'm sure a larger studio would round over, but as I said last time, that larger studio would also probably make design decisions to widen its appeal to more people, make it less hardcore, and then that really wouldn't be Insurgency Sandstorm. It's a game for people who like these more niche, sim-like takes on traditional shooters that appreciate the game for what it is. The new expansion adds more to the game than I actually imagined it would, whilst also signalling that the devs are continuing to support this title. And although the optional paid cosmetic DLC weapon packs feel a little wide of the mark, the character ones seem very well done, and the price is very fair, I think. I'm glad that this title goes from strength to strength, as even with more experience of titles in this genre, I find that Insurgency Sandstorm blends together the facets of milsim FPSs in a unique way and provides an experience that you really can't get anywhere else. Insurgency Sandstorm is £25.99 on Steam in the UK, although I've seen it regularly in the Steam sales as well. So if you're looking for a bargain, then those feel like they roll around every couple of weeks now, so just keep an eye out if you want a bit of a discount. I'm very interested to know what you think of Insurgency Sandstorm. Have you played it before? Have you played other titles like Squad or Hell Let Loose? And what do you think about how Sandstorm looks? Let me know your powerful thoughts and feelings by leaving a comment below right now. I'll of course be reading every single one of them. If you enjoyed this video, please do tap the thumb up button and consider tapping that subscribe button and ringing that bell as well, so you know when the next video is ready. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Take care.